What's up everyone, Cycle Breaker here. Today we're doing a full review of Iroi, NTE's first proper dedicated healer. She's also the newest member of the P-Shooter squad. 3 seconds after a Vita Bud spawns, it creates a copy, so now we're doubling the fee. And yes, that home outfit is Iroi's affinity reward. Get her to affinity level 10, and you can run around the entire city wearing it. We're covering everything. Iroi's signature arc versus her other options, a full breakdown of her kit, console recommendations, team ideas, and the value of each awakening. If this video helps, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Help me squeeze every last drop out of the algorithm. Alright, let's get into it. First, here's the short version on Iroi. If you have the pulls, I do recommend getting at least one copy. Right now, outside of Edgar, NTE really doesn't have another proper healer. And Iroi isn't just a limited S-rank healer. Her groups enemies, she heals the team, she buffs everyone's attack, and she can provide some defense ignore on top of that. So one team slot gives you grouping, healing, and support all at once. She's extremely versatile, and if your account can afford her, I think she's worth it. Her signature arc is the Wrong Gate. Its effect gives 16% attack, and Iroi's healing scales with attack, so both the substat and the passive directly increase her healing. More attack means bigger heals, plus a little more personal damage. Whenever the wearer heals, their anima damage also goes up by 30%. If you played 999 nights, you already know Iroi can put out some damage. In normal content, her personal damage is still limited because she's mainly a grouping healer, but damage is damage. The arc also gives the other characters in your lineup a 15% universal damage bonus, so the Wrong Gate improves all 3 parts of her kit: healing, personal damage, and team support. Using her signature as the 100% baseline, I'm honestly not too worried about the healing comparison. We survived this long without a real healer, right? For Iroi's personal damage, Lacrimosa's arc performs the best, followed by Youthful Fantasy. But at A0, Iroi's damage is a pretty small share of the team's total anyway. The real value of her signature is that 15% universal damage bonus, which works out to roughly an 8% to 9% increase in total team damage. Looking at the support chart, everything except the signature sits at about the same level. The small differences come from Iroi's E, which buffs the team based on her base attack. S-rank arcs have slightly higher base attack, so they also give her a slightly stronger team buff. For budget alternatives, Youthful Fantasy is one option. It gives her a little more attack and healing. If you're having trouble getting Iroi's ultimate charged in a team rotation, the A-rank arc Mind Royale is another solid choice. After she casts her redirect skill, it gives her 10 ultimate energy, going up to 18 at tier 5. That makes it easier to get her ultimate online. Since Iroi can run a console set that buffs the team's attack after she uses her ultimate, extra energy can be genuinely useful. It's a very reasonable budget arc. Now, signature arc or awakening? Here's the quick answer. I personally lean toward awakening. NTE gives you 6 different awakening upgrades, so there's usually at least one that fits what you need. And if you go for A1, the extra pull currency or byproducts may already be enough to pick up her signature arc anyway. So if you're spending beyond one copy, I'd prioritize an awakening first. That's the arc section. Now let's talk about Iroi herself. Alright, let's get into Iroi's actual kit. Iroi is an S-rank anima character with healing and damage boost tags. She's basically a 3-in-1 healer: healing, grouping, and support. Her gives you all 3 at once, which makes her incredibly easy to get online. For normal overworld farming, you don't need to worry about charging an ultimate first. Press E, and she's already doing her job. So when you're farming the open world and run into a pack, use Iroi's E, then swap straight to your main DPS. You get grouping, an attack buff, and a team heal from one button. In Abyss content, use her ultimate first to activate the support effect from her console set, then press E and swap out. The basic rotation really is that simple: Q, E, and leave. What makes her redirect skill so good is the uptime. It only has a 12-second cooldown, but the attack buff lasts 20 seconds. The buff is based on 20% of Iroi's base attack. Compare that with Haniel. Her E has a 20-second cooldown and only lasts 8 seconds, so she needs her ultimate to keep the buff covered. Iroi's 12-second cooldown and 20-second duration are much more flexible. You can bring her back halfway through a rotation, refresh the buff, and the cooldown still lines up. And remember, the same skill also groups enemies. Our other 2 groupers both have 16-second cooldown, so once you actually play Iroi, you can feel how good this E is. One very important warning: tap E. Do not hold it. Seriously, do not hold E unless you specifically want the regression gimmick. Holding it turns all 3 teammates into lambs, and they stay that way until combat ends. If you hold E, your 3 teammates become 3 lambs. The lambs can deal some damage, and the mechanic has a use in 999 nights, but for normal stages, I don't think their damage is enough. So for regular gameplay, just tap E. Next up is this resource in her redirect skill, Imagination. Imagination is the gauge above Iroi's HP bar. Her basic attacks and several skills build it. There are 2 main ways to spend Imagination, one through her basic attack string, and the other through her ultimate. If you hold basic attack, Iroi consumes Imagination to unleash up to 3 stages of Daydream. I'll put the multipliers on screen. The numbers aren't terrible, but Iroi doesn't naturally come with much crit rate or crit damage, and the animation takes a while. Unless you're building a very specific swap rotation, an A0 Iroi usually gets more value from saving Imagination for her ultimate. Casting her ultimate opens a dream, and the effect changes based on how much Imagination you built. If you haven't reached the threshold, she opens the dream of the Horn Gate, which continuously heals the whole team. You can see the green healing glow pop twice and then disappear here. That's because the ultimate's duration also depends on Imagination. It drains 8 Imagination per second, and the dream ends when the gauge hits 0. With an empty gauge, the ultimate is extremely short. With enough Imagination, the dream lasts longer, gives you more team healing, and continuously deals anima damage to enemies. Here's a quick demo on floor 10 of the Permanent Abyss. We go in with a full Imagination bar, cast the ultimate, and just walk around for a second so you can see the damage tick. The damage isn't huge, but for an off-field healer, it's still nice to have. The takeaway is simple. The more Imagination Iroi has when she casts her ultimate, the better. The Dream of the Ivory Gate also has one special effect. While the ultimate is active, you can press and hold the portrait of a character in Regression to bring them back temporarily. Earlier, we talked about holding Iroi's E to force all 3 teammates into Regression, but if you scroll farther down the skill description, you'll also see that teammates enter Regression when they get knocked out. So if somebody suddenly dies in a stage, Iroi can cast her ultimate and temporarily pull the character back into the fight. It does help recover from a mistake, but only a little, because the revival lasts only until the ultimate ends. In actual combat, the revived character often disappears again before they can even finish a full rotation. So the idea of holding E, putting the team into Regression, and then using the ultimate to bring them back for damage is not very practical in normal content. If you want to play around with that gimmick, take it into 999 nights. Everywhere else, I recommend using Iroi as a normal healer. So, conclusion number 1, tap the redirect skill. Don't hold it. Conclusion number 2, cast the ultimate with as much Imagination as possible. Most of the time, bring Iroi in, press Q and E, then swap out. She's a very simple, very effective QE support that covers her E and ultimate. The third part is how to build Imagination quickly. Iroi can build Imagination at a decent rate while she's on field, but keeping your healer on field usually isn't a great plan. The lambs from Heldi can also restore a big chunk with their attacks, but as we just covered, that setup isn't very practical either. The reliable method is to swap to Iroi when your Esper cycle is ready and trigger her support skill. Look at the gauge here. One entry gives her a huge chunk. Her redirect skill also builds Imagination while healing the whole team, which gives you another layer of safety. So if you need more Imagination, rotate Iroi in more often. That's the basic resource loop. Her last 2 passives are also worth covering. Sympathetic Nerves gives the team a small amount of defense ignore whenever Iroi heals, plus some extra support value. Mirror Image is the P-Shooter passive we mentioned earlier. After a Vita Bud has existed for 3 seconds, it creates 1 copy. The copy only deals 37.5% of the original Vita Bud's damage per shot, but it fires every 0.5 seconds. Put several Vita Bud enablers together, and suddenly the P-Shooters start going wild. If you're running this setup, make sure your main character has plenty of cycle intensity, so those shots actually hit hard. And that's the full skill breakdown. Overall, if you can afford her, I recommend pulling Iroi. She heals, busts, and groups, all from a single E with a 12-second cooldown, grouping that often would already be strong by itself, and she brings a lot more than that. For her console, my top recommendation is Speedy Hedgehog. The 2-piece gives energy, and the 4-piece gives the whole team an attack buff after Iroi casts her ultimate. If you're worried about her healing, you can run healing bonus as the main stat. Personally, I don't think she needs it, so I run attack instead. That gives me a little more healing and a little more damage, which is a nice middle ground. For module substats, go with attack and damage bonus. That's the general purpose setup, and it works in basically every team. If you're building specifically around Shinku, where Shinki usually rotates directly into Iroi, you can also stack as much cycle intensity as possible across the whole setup. That makes the P-Shooter follow-up much stronger when Iroi comes in. And that's the console section. As for teams, Iroi can fit almost anywhere right now. She isn't just a healer, she's also a buffer and a grouper, so nearly every team can find a reason to use her. One option is a Nan-Ally team built around the P-Shooter setup. If you have Hotori, you can also work Joyuan into the lineup. Vita buds keep firing during Hotori's time stop, so enemies get to sit there and take the full shower of peas. A Shinku team is an obvious fit. Chaos works just fine too, and you can slot Iroi into a Lacrimosa team. Her value is broad enough that healing, buffs, grouping, and survival will always find a home somewhere. And, well, the feet are a bonus. Finally, let's go through her awakenings. Awakening 1 gives Iroi 3 imagination per second while she's off-field, increases imagination gain efficiency by 30%, and starts each fight with a full gauge. Once you have A1, you barely need to think about imagination anymore. Cast the ultimate whenever it's ready, keep the dream active longer, and get more damage ticks on enemies. For general use, A1 is my first recommendation. Awakening 2 summons a lamb whenever any teammate casts a skill, and the lamb also gives the teammate a heal. The effect can provide up to a 40% multiplier each second. At skill level 9, 1 tick of Iroi's ultimate is 46.3%, so if A2 triggers consistently, it isn't that far behind A1 in practice. It works especially well with characters like Shinku, who casts E frequently. Nanali's E has a much longer cooldown, though, so A2 isn't as universally useful as A1. Awakening 3 gives 36% healing effect. I tested it, and it appears to be an independent multiplier, so yes, this one makes the heals huge. Awakening 4 increases the lamb's attack multiplier after regression by 30%. If you want to play Iroi on field or lean into the regression setup, this is the one for that playstyle. Awakening 5 upgrades the defense ignore passive with an additional 15% attack buff. I'll put the exact team gain on screen so you can see the difference. Awakening 6 upgrades characters revived by her ultimate. They come back with 100% HP, 50 cycle energy, and 50 ultimate energy. For general account value, I prioritize A1 first, then consider A5 for the team buff, followed by A2. If you want to experiment with on-field Iroi and regression teams, A4 and A6 are the more interesting pick. Her 3 awakening bonus raises all of her skill levels by 1 and gives the entire team 30% defense while Iroi is in the party. If we eventually get a defense scaling main DPS, that could become surprisingly valuable. At 6 awakenings, Iroi gives the team 25% crit damage. For every teammate in regression, she also gains 10% damage and 5% crit rate, so A6 opens the door to a real regression-focused Iroi build. Last thing, let's take a look at Iroi's open world life skill. The passive at the top is 95 million year divide. Interacting with small animals gives you a random growth material, up to 3 times per day, and 999 times total. So yes, Iroi can basically mug the wildlife for upgrade math. And that is everything you need to know about Iroi. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.